The first Senate vote on the $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief package could happen today.
This morning, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky joining us to discuss the latest developments and more. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Absolutely. So on Wednesday, the Senate met to discuss this newly revised relief bill. We know that this is not something that's going to, of course, pass overnight. A procedural vote could stretch into the weekend, and this doesn't need to be said. You know, there is a divide on Capitol Hill, but what are your thoughts just heading into this vote?
You know, it will require the government, our country, to borrow $2 trillion. We're borrowing about $1 trillion every year just to keep up with our normal expenses, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, et cetera, military. So we borrow $1 million just for normal expenses. This is going to add $2 trillion more. Last year we borrowed $4 trillion. So we're looking at $6 or $7, $8 trillion in 2 years. I think it's going to hurt the country. I also think that it mistakes where we are. We're coming up out of this pandemic. The numbers of daily cases is dropping dramatically. It's a straight downward curve right now. There are people predicting that by the end of April, between the vaccine and those who have naturally had this, will have enough immunity that we will have beaten this pandemic. And I think that's a very good possibility. This isn't the time to borrow more money. This is the time to open the economy, get rid of the mandates, let the restaurants thrive. The restaurants can't thrive until Governor Beshear gets out of the way and we get rid of the mandates.
And we could talk about that for a moment. I want to get to one thing. There's a lot of pork items in this relief bill. That would be the opinion of a lot of Republicans that are voting on this. What are some of those unrelated items to the actual relief? A lot of people had a problem last year knowing that people got stimulus checks in the mail, but they were actually employed at the time. What good does that do?
Yeah, there's no determination whether you're employed or not. So you can make $150,000 a year, husband and wife, and you can get a check. That means you're still earning $150,000 a year. I don't consider that to be a poor person nor a needy person. So I think it's a terrible idea to send people with jobs checks, particularly since we have to borrow the money to give them the checks. But as far as pork in there, there's $10 million to study Native American languages. There's $750 million to build Native American housing. There is $300 billion in there to bail out New York, California, and Illinois for their profligate spending ways. So when we in Kentucky have to be more conservative, or Florida or other states are more conservative spending, New York has been reckless, California has been reckless, Illinois has been reckless, and they're going to be bailed out through this. So I think when you look at this, it's the wrong time, it's too much money, too much borrowing, and it's going to the wrong people, not to those who are being hurt. So if I were looking at this, I would extend unemployment, but I wouldn't do any of the rest of the things, and I would try to open the economy as quickly as possible and tell people who have been vaccinated to live again, go out, shop, go to restaurants, and tell people who have had the disease, shop again, live again, get on a plane, get out there and live your life. And I think if we did, the economy would perk up even more.
Another sticking point for a lot of Kentuckians heading back to school, getting schools back to normal full time. The Kentucky Senate voting to reopen schools. And of course, that's backing up Andy Beshear. The tone has changed quite a bit in the past several months there in Kentucky. Your thoughts on this? You've had a background in healthcare most of your career, plus you battled the same virus. Your thoughts on opening these schools up? Is it too soon, or should they have been opened up several months ago?
We're only 9 months behind the times. Private schools in Louisville, private schools in Lexington have been open the whole time without any surge. When you look at studies worldwide, most of Europe has remained open in their schools, in-person learning without a surge. Kids don't die from this. They very, very rarely die from this. The death rate for under 25 is about 1 in a million, which is less than the seasonal flu. So we overreacted to this and did the wrong thing, and we destroyed the economy. But we've also destroyed kids' lives. I mean, kids have been out of school for a year. Poor kids may not have the family structure at home to learn. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I think it's been very, very difficult for a lot of kids who lost a year of education. Suicides among children are up. American College of Pediatricians has been saying open schools for 8 months. So yes, open them, but by golly, they're about 6 to 9 months late in doing this.
Senator Rand Paul, you were talking a lot about the overspending in this proposal, but we of course know millions of Americans still out of work, depending on that unemployment, federal and state dollars. You know, time is of the essence here. We know that on March 14th, those unemployment benefits are going to run out for millions of Americans. Do you have any concerns of not meeting this deadline? You guys need to vote, the Senate needs to vote, and then you got to get it back to the House so they can also vote.
This bill won't have any Republican support because it's just a pork-laden bill that adds $2 trillion in debt. But I would do something. I'd open the economy, which get a lot of jobs back very quickly, and temporarily I would extend unemployment. But I wouldn't add federal dollars to it. Here's the reason. When you add the federal dollars, it's essentially $50,000 a year. So what happens is if you make less than $50,000 a year, why would you want to go back to work? Someone offers you a job for $37,000 or $42,000. Why would you go back to work if you can get $50,000 for not working? So what happens is government institutionalizes unemployment. So extending unemployment is a reasonable thing. We have a state-run program. It's usually 26 weeks. I think we could go longer, and the federal government could help. We'd have more money to help if we weren't giving checks to people who make $150 grand a year, though. So there are many other ways to do it. But what the Democrats are doing are just throwing pork into a big bucket, and they're going to throw this out there. They're going to kill the country with all this debt, but they really aren't giving it to people in need. They're just, passing out free checks and hope they can buy votes for the next election.
It's almost similar to the same pinch that a lot of landlords are in because they're in the middle of this. There's relief offered to those tenants, but not necessarily the relief offered to those that hold those mortgages. And the employers in some of these situations are in the same boat. Thank you, U.S. Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, for your time this morning.
Thank you.